So just really to reiterate where we're at the moment, we know that the ESRS has 5 topics under their environmental category of sustainability. Their first one is specifically targeted at disclosure requirements for climate change. And while the ISSB recommends the use of SASB standards for other sustainability-related disclosures, they have not yet produced ISSB-specific documents pertaining to the disclosure of other environmental categories like the ESRS has done. So the ISSB has confirmed that projects are underway whereby the development of these additional environmental standards are in the pipeline. However, this is only to be expected within the medium to long term. So in line with the ISSB and the ESRS is the SEC, which is the US Securities and Exchange Commission. And the SEC issued a proposed rule in March last year that would enhance and standardize the climate-related disclosures provided by public companies. So in the proposing release, the SEC noted that the disclosures registrants would be required to provide are similar to those that companies provide under existing disclosure frameworks and standards, such as the TCFD and Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And similar to the ISSB, this proposal really focuses only on climate-related disclosures with an investor financial materiality focus. So this is why much of our research has been analyzing and comparing the climate-related disclosure requirements of these 3 bodies. There is commonality among each of the proposals and standards issued, including that of the TCFD framework, forming a shared input. However, there are also areas where they are not aligned, which may create practical challenges for companies trying to design coherent and consistent reporting that meets the needs of both global investors as well as jurisdictional requirements. The proposals and issued standards are ambitious and would have a significant impact on companies. For multinationals and others needing to apply multiple frameworks, the challenges would be magnified if the requirements are not compatible. So a key practical consideration would, for example, be aligning calculation methodologies or minimizing the different data requirements. Achieving a global baseline would really support companies in applying the standards, as well as driving consistent reporting across jurisdictions, reporting that is internationally comparable but also meets local needs. So assessing these climate standards provides a great example of the need for convergence, because the obvious question to ask is, are we going to get a global standard for climate-related reporting if 3 different organizations have issued proposals and official releases? So the good news is that all 3 bodies do have a lot more in common than different. The foundation for broad commonality really relies on the fact that the framework developed by the TCFD is foundational for all 3 bodies. All 3 build on the widely used GHG protocol as well, but nevertheless, the 3 climate frameworks have their own specificities and requirements, which will create differences in reporting practices. And we have attempted to provide an overall structural breakdown of the key climate-related metrics and targets used across all 3 organizations. However, this is simply not as easy as one would expect. At a glance, each of the proposed standards has certain requirements on specific aspects. However, when considered together, the result is that the most stringent requirement would have to be applied. During our research at Reward Value, we have been looking at how each of these organizations differ with regards to their climate-related disclosure requirements, and we have really been working on the categorization of these standards, where it can be noted that each high-level metric can further be divided into additional metrics. But let us look at the example on the disclosure requirements for GHG Scope 3 emissions. So here we can see there are evidently notable differences for Scope 3 disclosure requirements. And as we know, your GHG Scope 3 emissions are emissions throughout the company's value chain, both upstream and downstream. These are much more difficult to measure. In general, investors want them, while companies are concerned about their ability to generate accurate Scope 3 information, as well as the cost of doing so. So the SEC's requirement is the most parsimonious, only requiring Scope 3 disclosures if financially material or where a company has set Scope 3 reduction targets. Companies reporting under the ISSB framework are required to disclose such information without being provided any guidelines such as the use of thresholds or materiality assessments. Companies reporting under the ESRS framework are required to disclose such information subject to a materiality assessment. And the EU Commission's recent consultation on a delegated act has introduced phase-in provisions whereby special relief has been introduced for companies with less than 750 employees, whereby data points on Scope 3 and total GHG emissions may be emitted for the first reporting year. So we can see here that the ESRS's E1 is more prescriptive and provides guidelines on how frequently Scope 3 inventory should be performed and how it should be disclosed. Only material categories of Scope 3 GHG emissions based on the GHG protocol. So if a company is concurrently listed in a territory that adopts ISSB standards word by word, then it will be bound to disclose Scope 3 GHG emissions information, even though that disclosure may not be required by the SEC proposal or by ESRS E1. And given most jurisdictions' listings rules would require companies with multiple listings to provide the same information across different filings, this means that Scope 3 GHG emissions disclosures would need to be included in the SEC filings and in the EU sustainability reporting. So the key differences between these standards really relate to what information is considered relevant or material. We know that the ISSB focuses on financial materiality, and this lens proves particularly close to the SEC's investor-driven approach. The ESRS, however, explicitly integrates the impact of companies' activities or impact materiality, which is enshrined in the EU law by the CSRD. Considering the different approaches taken, these standards are unlikely to be fully interoperable from the get-go. However, efforts towards maximized levels of interoperability are fortunately being made. For example, the ISSB has set out a potential route forward to the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board that would support companies wishing to apply both the ISSB and ESRS standards together. It centers around identifying a common area of intersection. In other words, a subset of the requirements that would be aligned sufficiently, such as that applying one standard would satisfy the other. The ISSB and EU bodies are collaborating to create an interoperability mapping table to highlight this layer of intersection. The key challenge here is to maximize the content in the intersection and avoid having similar requirements that are excluded from the intersection because they are subtly different. In its October 2022 board meeting last year, the ISSB indicated the direction of its standard setting to EFRAG and supported expanding this area of intersection. Its decisions were accelerated to give EFRAG certainty before EFRAG updated its draft standards in November 2022. So in the updated draft ESRS standards released in November, EFRAG has made key changes to support this interoperability compared to their earlier versions. This includes aligning to a greater extent with the ISSB on concepts of financial materiality and value chain, content of cross-cutting disclosure requirements, the architecture of its standards, such as the use of the TCFD framework, and introducing disclosures included in the then proposed ISSB S2. So the European Commission states that it has engaged closely with the ISSB and the GRI to ensure a high degree of interoperability with the ESRS. And further modifications to the draft ESRS have been made in light of that engagement. And now that the final IFRS S1 and S2 documents have been released, a detailed analysis of interoperability can be soon expected to identify to what extent duplication in reporting is avoided. What we know now for certain is that the ESRS is referenced in the final ISSB standards as a source of guidance on matters where a specific ISSB standard is absent. The key point is that great progress is being made in developing a global baseline for climate-related disclosures. and this bodes well for standards for other sustainability issues. Ideally, in the mid to long term, we will have a solid set of sustainability reporting standards on which high quality assurance can be done, just as we have for financial reporting. Today, it's hard to imagine a world without required financial reporting based on a set of standards about a company's financial performance. Another vision is that 10 years from now, it will be hard to imagine a world without the same being true for a company's sustainability performance. And with that in mind, the key question is right now, how can we leverage information that is available now for our own research or for the development of tooling, as I referred to earlier?